Welcome to the second in this series of meditation masterclasses. Our theme for this evening is finding your balance. It's all about balance. Balance is one of those master concepts that runs through so many different aspects of life. It's a key that you can use to transform many things in your life. Once you understand a few simple things about balance, and that's what we're going to be exploring this evening. I'm also going to take you through a meditation towards the end of the session that is an incredible one for establishing a sense of balance within you, a state of balance, so that you've got a reference point. And that's really important because it's one thing to talk about the concept or the idea of balance. It's another thing to actually be able to experience it and remember it, so that you can track for yourself when you're in balance and out of balance. So it's a very powerful technique that I'll be taking you through to help you have that experience. But before we do that, let's go on the journey of exploring this theme of balance, this idea of balance. The first area I wanted to explore was examples of balance and imbalance in our lives. What are we talking about here? What's the scope of this? Obviously, there's work-life balance. A lot of people talk about this, very important. At a basic level, are we doing too much of one, not enough of the other? Is it something that you go in and out of balance around that? What does balance even look like? Interestingly, we live in a society that is quite out of balance in many ways. And so if that is your reference point, what's normal, what's everyone else doing around me, by default, you're going to end up out of balance. And so you've got to find what's the right balance for you. And we'll come back to this idea later. Let's look at more areas where there can be balance and imbalance in our lives. So sleep is another area where people experience balance and imbalance. Now, the common one is what? Not enough sleep or poor quality sleep. But let's just say not enough sleep, not enough good quality sleep. That's the common one. But you can also oversleep. You can have too much sleep. That also takes you out of balance in a different way. Food, not enough food, too much food. In our society, it's more likely to be too much food, but not always. Water, don't drink enough, drink too much. Screen time, I'll say no more. And you know, ironically, here we are on Zoom. Exercise, it could be not enough exercise or too much exercise, or it could be unbalanced exercise. So you're overworking one area, not working another area. Another area which you can consider when you're contemplating this idea of balance and how balanced are you in your life and where do you need to bring more balance. Another area is thinking versus feeling versus doing. Okay, are we too much in one? Are we not enough in another? Stubborn versus yielding. This is an interesting one. And I've deliberately picked those words, those terms to describe this. We could say assertive versus yielding, and it's like, oh no, it's good to be assertive. But I wanted to bring something in that you could see that it could be problematic if it was overdone. You know, stubborn versus yielding. Where's the balance? Stimulation versus quiet. Earning versus spending. You know, money. And I have already mentioned work-life balance. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of areas just to open up the field of what is it we're talking about here. And there'd be a whole lot of other areas as well. That's not an exhaustive list, but just to open your mind to the idea that there are many different areas, many different ways and places where we can explore this concept of balance, where it has something to offer us. And because we live lives and because we have tendencies which are based on habit. And when we practice a habit enough times until it becomes second nature, then we lose awareness. You don't notice anymore. You know, the person that has a limp their whole life doesn't notice the limp anymore. They still have a limp, it still affects them, but they're only minimally aware of it, if at all. And so many of our imbalances are habitual to the point where we don't even notice anymore how out of balance we are. And as I mentioned before, if you're surrounded by other people who are also out of balance in the same way, so that it's normalized, then we can really be unaware that there's anything going on for us there. Let's keep going. So suppose you become aware that there is an area that you did want to be more balanced around. What to do with that? Well, it's not like you can just immediately snap to balance. If you're habitually out of balance, you'll have built a whole lot of structures, habits around that. Personality, a lifestyle, an identity, routine, and so on. Postures, held postures. So attitudes, beliefs, there'll be a whole lot of things wrapped around the imbalance. So it's not like usually you can't just find balance and then just stay there and you're good. It's not usually like that. Generally, what we're talking about here is you'll need to explore the opposite of what you usually do. So imagine that it's like a spectrum, it's like a line. And if you're towards one end of the line, one end of the spectrum, and what you need to do is explore the opposite polarity, which is usually the unexplored one, or the one that's in your shadow, if we're talking psychology. So we need to explore the opposite so that you can establish a range. You've got flexibility where you can move up and down this range. Then that establishes a range, and then you can find the balance. That's usually what we need to do. You know, and I'm not just talking about, oh, I'm a bit thirsty, I need to drink a bit more, I drink a bit more and I'm done. Something a bit more involved than that. Yeah, a bit more of a habit that you've become entrenched in. So usually we need to explore the opposite so we can establish a range, and then we can try and find where's the happy middle ground here. So that means that, interestingly enough, you may need to go out of balance in the opposite direction for a time, temporarily, before you can find your middle ground. So this is a courageous act to explore the opposite, and in fact, to maybe go a little bit too far in the opposite direction before we can come back to the middle. I'll give an example of this at a societal level. Affirmative action. Affirmative action is a deliberate imbalance in the opposite direction to counterbalance an historical imbalance there. So if we find that women have been oppressed for 2,000 years, then maybe there needs to be a bit more attention to promoting the females and the feminine in society for a period of time. And maybe in that period of time, men get a little bit less attention, and men's issues get less attention for a while, knowing that eventually we want everyone to be looked after. Anyway, there's an example around feminism, but you could apply that to race, you can apply that to different sexual orientations, you can apply that to different socioeconomic groups, etc. There's that idea. So that's at a societal level. We have the same sort of thing within ourselves. You know, let's say I'll just pick something, earning versus spending, money in versus money out. Let's say that you've spent most of your focus on trying to earn more and get more money in, but you haven't really focused on how you're spending. You might need to put the earning side of the equation on the back burner and really kind of workshop or troubleshoot your spending. Let's say there was an issue, you wanted to improve your finances. Maybe that's the unexplored area. Even though eventually, obviously, you need to be on top of both of those. Anyway, I think you get the idea by now. I've got two questions for you. The first question is, what is one key area that you want to bring more balance to? What is one key area you want to bring balance to? And then the second question is, what's the opposite to your habit in that area? Or what's the opposite to the way it has been in the past? Okay, got some answers come through. So Angela's written willpower. What I'm looking for is what's the area that you want to bring more balance to, right?
Yeah.
And then what's the opposite to the way it's been in the past?
Yeah. So I find that I'm quite yielding and not very forthright. And then there's this other part where, I keep thinking I need to do some breath work to get a bit of fire in my belly. And so what I'm discovering is finding the balance between these two.
And what's the two?
The two is the a lack of willpower
Yes.
and willpower versus it's almost like yielding or
Okay.
gentleness. I'm not really sure what the opposite is, but
So
it's
can we call it yielding versus assertiveness?
yes,
Okay. And which is the one that you've been stuck in more of the time in the past?
yielding.
Yielding. Okay. So if I asked you to describe the yielding state, you wouldn't find that so hard, right?
Yeah,
You're familiar with it. But when
very.
it comes to describing the opposite, you're like, a little bit vague, a little bit unsure.
Yes,
Yeah? And this is my point.
absolutely.
This is my point that I was making, which is that you need to be able to explore the opposite before you can find where's the right balance, where's the middle ground.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't explored the opposite, it's not even available to you to find the right measure. If we're not even sure if it is assertiveness, it's very hard to find the right amount of it. Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Thank you. Thank you for being my example. That demonstrates the point quite beautifully. So let's have a look what other people have written here. Charlotte says, meditate. Okay, so screen time. I'm guessing it's too much screen time rather than not enough. And the opposite, Charlotte says, is meditation. I use screen time to prevent boredom. So this is interesting. So practice being bored, practice meditating. Hopefully that doesn't mean meditation's boring, but anyway, we'll see. Anyway, I like your thinking there, Charlotte. Lynette says, indulgence versus discipline. Are we seeing that we need more discipline or just you've got both of them, but it's just balancing them or more discipline? Okay, right, got it. Diane says patience. I'm guessing, Diane, it's a matter of um, impatience versus patience. I mean, I don't know. There are times and people that are too patient, and they need to practice being a little bit less patient. That's definitely a thing. But more commonly, we see the opposite, where a little more patience would be useful or helpful. Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone. Now, this brings me to my next point. Patience, impatience one is a good example of this. It's not about good versus bad. It might look on the face of it, and traditionally, maybe patient is good, impatient equals bad. Okay, and if I can just be patient and get rid of my impatience, then tick, I'm doing well. But it's not like that. Balance teaches us a different lesson, that you can have too much or too little of anything. And too much of a good thing becomes not a good thing, becomes problematic. So let's take the idea of patience. Generally speaking, more patience is a good thing for most of us a lot of the time. But then there are certain times when being patient only allows a problem to become worse. Maybe there's something that needs to be nipped in the bud. We have a saying, a stitch in time saves nine. So maybe there's times where we need to be prompt and not be overly patient with something, not let something get out of hand or carry on too far or too long. You know, if the child is about to run across the road into the traffic, that's not a time to practice being overly patient. In fact, a prompt response is very necessary. You know, there's an extreme example, but it gives you the idea there. So one of our problems with seeking balance is that often we get stuck into this binary way of thinking. This is good, that is bad. And then we punish ourselves whenever we catch ourselves doing the bad thing and say, oh, I should be like that instead. And you might have noticed that not only does that not leave you feeling very good about yourself, but it also doesn't tend to work in practice. And this is this binary good bad thinking. So we kind of need to put that aside. And rather than saying, you know, should I be patient rather than impatient, the question becomes a little more refined. It becomes, what's the right amount of patience for me to practice? Where's the right balance? And now what's really interesting is that that's going to be different in different situations. And so it's not just about where is the right balance. It's about where is the right balance in this moment, in this situation. Now it's coming to this idea, which is that balance is not a static thing. It's not exactly 50%, you know, exactly half. It's a dynamic process where sometimes it's a bit more like this, sometimes a bit more like that. Walking is the perfect archetype to describe this. In order to walk, you actually have to become imbalanced. You have to favor one side. The left leg goes forward. And then you need to become unbalanced in the opposite way. The right leg goes forward. And then you need to come back to being unbalanced towards the left. And so there's an alternating shifting of favoring one, favoring the other, favoring one, favoring the other. That's how we walk forward. If you're not able to do that, a static holding pattern, then you end up standing still. There's no walking going on. There's no progress in that. Okay, now maybe if you want to stand still, maybe that's fine. But if you want to actually evolve and grow and move and change life, then it's a shifting sense of finding the right balance in this moment. And that's a fluid thing. You might have noticed the image that I used for this masterclass, Find Your Balance. There was a guy on a tightrope. And he's not just walking, you know, in a straight line down the middle. He's very much, he's very much finding that balance in order to stay on the tightrope. And that's the image I'd like you to hold around these things. So firstly, it's not a good-bad dichotomy. It's about the right amount. And secondly, the right amount is not exactly 50% and always 50%, exactly half and half. Sometimes the man needs to come first. Other times the woman needs to come first. It's not like everyone gets exactly 50%. Let me put it in terms of a conversation. Sometimes the man needs to listen and the woman gets to speak. Sometimes the woman needs to listen and the man gets to speak. This is relationship. This is where the magic happens. This is where conversation happens. And there can be an interaction and a dynamic. The problem is if it's stuck one way only. Now, what we unfortunately tend to do is we label one is good and the other is bad. Generally because the good one has been underdone and the bad one has been overdone, and that was problematic. So because we've now labeled this is good, that is bad, then we favor the other way and we tend to switch over. Now, as a stepping stone temporarily, as I've said, that's fine. But if we don't realize that it's only a stepping stone and we don't realize that you're really looking for balance, then what happens is you just swing the other way. And you see this when, for example, the parent was the doctor or the lawyer or the policeman, and then the child becomes the artist or the hippie or the bohemian or the rebel, right? Because they swing the other way. Not because that's what the child's nature was to be, but as a reaction against the parent. And I've seen it go the other way as well. The parent is the hippie and the child becomes the banker. And in neither of those cases is the child finding their own destiny and discovering who they're supposed to be, who they're born to be within themselves. It's just one is a reaction against the other. And so you see this polarity in history as well, where you have one extreme and then it flips to the other. And I won't go much deeper than this, but the deep philosophy behind this is that it's actually the same problem. It's just the other side of the same coin. Right? You know, if it's left wing, left wing, left wing, oh, they look at all the problems that left wing created, and they swing to right wing, right wing, right wing, right wing, then that creates its own set of problems, and then you swing back to left. In none of those cases, from left to right, in none of those cases are we actually finding a harmonious integration and wholeness and balance there. Right? They're actually two sides of the same problem. And the problem is, let's call that wingism. Right? Left wing, right wing. The problem is wingism. Feminism is sexist. Oops, I said it. Feminism is sexist, just the same way masculinism is sexist. Now, maybe we need to be sexist a little bit in the other way as a corrective measure, but it's not the solution. It's not the final end result. You know, the final place we need to arrive at is where there's harmony and respect for difference, harmony and respect for what each gender has to offer, where both sides are respect themselves, respect each other, and they're working together in a beautiful, harmonious fashion. That's really where we need to end up. Let's pick something else. Let's say a person overspends money, ends up in debt, credit card debt, keeps spending too much. And so it's like, I need to learn to rein it in. I need to learn to not spend money. So now I'm going to not spend anything unless I absolutely have to. I'm going to try and save everything. Okay, it's a good countermeasure, but it's the other extreme. And if you get stuck there, then that leads to its own form of imbalance. Because the real problem, it might present as overspending, but the real problem is not spending the right amount. It's not that spending is bad, it's just that you're not spending the right amount. And so if you're underspending, the house is falling down around you, you've got money in the bank, but you're living in dire straits as if you were poor, even though you're not. If you're underspending, that's still not the right amount of spending. I'm hoping that demonstrates the point you can see there. You're looking for the right amount, not to swing to the opposite polarity. And I've seen this, you know, like I work with people one-on-one a lot, counseling, therapy, coaching, and so on. And this is something I very commonly see, where people go from one extreme to the other. And then it's not sustainable. It's like a pendulum swings. They can't keep up with it because it's just too harsh, too strict, too extreme. And then they swing back to the original position. And so this is like diets, people that go on extreme diet, and it's like boom and bust, boom and bust. You've got to find this moderate middle ground. And like I'm saying, the moderate middle ground is not static, it's dynamic. It's a bit fluid. It shifts a little bit this way and a little bit that way, depending on the circumstances. You know, the phase of the moon, where's the stars, what's the weather that day, what mood are you in, what did you eat last night? You know, like this thing is dynamic. Now, here's the exciting thing. This requires you to be present. Because the only way to get the balance right, we'll call it, ideal, if every situation is unique and requires your best judgment call, the only way to do that is to actually pay attention. You need to be present. You need to be aware. You need to be sensitive, your finger on the pulse. And then you can discern where's the right balance. And if you're paying attention and you get it wrong, then you'll learn. And then you'll refine your judgment. And next time you'll find a better balance. So, like Charlotte's saying, screen time versus meditation, it would be tempting to say, never look at a screen again and meditate all day. You know, you'll get enlightened really quickly, go for it. But actually, maybe for you, that's not the right balance. Maybe it's really a matter of what's the right amount of screen time. And you'll probably have to go a bit too far the other way of not having enough screen time to know what that feels like, to see the problem of that in order to find what's the right amount. Okay, I think you get the idea. The last piece philosophically around this idea of balance, which I want to share with you, is something that one of my teachers, Paul Tisdale, passed on to me, which is that when you find the right balance, it leads to transcendence. Let me explain what that means. Let's say it's not enough sleep versus too much sleep. Let's say that's the struggle, getting the right amount of sleep. Let's say the common one, people are running on a sleep deficit, they're not getting enough sleep. It causes a whole bunch of problems as a result of that. So you try sleep more. Now, maybe you get to a point where you actually overdo it. You roll over and go back to sleep for another round when it really is time to get up now. And then that causes its own set of problems. So you go, all right, I'm here struggling to find what's the right amount of sleep. Okay, now if you can find it, and more than just one day, hopefully, but if you can find it where you've basically sorted that issue out, where, oh, now I used to not get enough sleep, and then sometimes I oversleep, but now I've actually found a really good sleep rhythm, sleep routine, and I've bedded that down. It's working well for me. I'm getting just the right amount, or pretty close to spot on with the right amount each night, and that's just become normal for me now. Okay, so I've established balance in that area. What's the next step after that? What happens after that? Assuming that that's maintained, what happens is you stop thinking about sleep so much. You're not obsessed about sleep anymore. You're not thinking about it. You're not struggling with it. It's just not an issue. Basically, you move on to something else, and that's the transcendence. So if you can establish balance in an area, it sets you free to focus on other things. If you can't establish balance in an area, then part of you is always going to be caught up in that. You won't really be free to move on to fullness of life, or fulfilling your purpose, fulfilling your potential, having the best day you can have, making a difference for others or in the world, whatever. You can't move on to bigger and better things, experiencing an enlightened state of consciousness, if you're still struggling with, do I eat or do I not eat? Do I eat or do I not eat? Like you just get trapped at some lesser level. And so that's the last piece I wanted to share with you, which is that balance exists within a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that if you can find balance, it allows you to move on where you're not even thinking about that thing anymore. You've actually got broader horizons, and you're on to things that are more meaningful and more significant. Okay, I think it's time for me to take you through the meditation. My way of leading you into this is, we'll start with just a very short technique to lead in, and then I'll give you the main one with a little bit of chat in between. So the first one is just observing the breath. Now, I don't want you to change your breathing. I don't want you to breathe any particular way, but I just want you to notice what your breath is doing. So I'll get you to close your eyes, and as best as you're able to, not changing your breathing if you can, just let it do whatever it's doing naturally. And I want you to notice the movement of breath, and notice your breath. observing your breath. And as you observe your breath, I'd like you to notice, if you will, which parts of your body move as you breathe. And in particular, I'd like you to be aware of where is your breath centered. Is it more up in your chest or even your throat? Or is it down in your belly? Or is it in between the two in the middle? Now, other parts might move, but there'll be a center. There'll be an area where your breath is focused more than elsewhere. So I'd like you to become aware of that. Is it in your chest or your belly or in the middle? Or are you not sure or it's complicated? Okay, and continuing to observe the breath, I'd like you to notice now whether you're breathing through your nose or your mouth or a bit of both. Try not to change it, just notice what's happening by itself. Okay, and we're going to leave that there for the moment. I kind of cheated. That's not really a full meditation. It was a bit more of an observation exercise, but I have got a proper technique for you in a moment. I just want to check in with you first as to what you observed. Where was the breath focused? The chest, in the belly, in the mid area, or it's complicated, not sure. And then was it breathing through the nose, the mouth, or a bit of both? Okay, so Lynette says upper belly and breathing through the nose. Diane says breathing in the chest and through the nose. Chanel says breathing in the chest and throat and through the nose. Peter said breathing in the middle, but it was complicated, and breathing through the nose. Angela, belly, then chest, then I checked my... Anyway, it goes on and on and on. Basically, it's complicated, and through her nose. Charlotte started with the lungs, then it deepened to the solar plexus, but it wavered, and breathing through the nose. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So there was a little bit of variation in where it was located, but it tended to be higher up rather than lower down. No one was saying lower belly. It was from upper belly up to the chest, and probably more people at the chest than anywhere else. But everyone said breathing through the nose. Now, I don't know if it's because I said, oh, now we're meditating, close your eyes, and we all started breathing through the nose. But I don't think so. I'll tell you something here. I wasn't going to tell you this, but I'll give away one of the little secrets here. When you breathe through the nose, okay, firstly, every breath pattern puts you in a different state. But every state puts you in a different breath pattern. Goes either direction, both ways. If you're more thinking and in your head and in your mind, if you're in more of a intellectual, reflective, cognitive state, you'll tend to breathe through your nose. If you're in a very strongly physically stimulated state, you'll tend to breathe through your mouth. I mentioned it works both ways. If you deliberately breathe in and out through your mouth, it'll put you into a more physically stimulated state. If you deliberately breathe in and out through the nose, it'll put you more into a mental state. That's just what it does. You can test that for yourself if you like. So we've been sitting here and I've been speaking philosophy and ideas and concepts to you for 45 minutes. And then I get you to check your breathing and you're all breathing in and out through your nose. If I'd gotten you all to get up and do star jumps and then said, where are you breathing? It probably would have been a lot more through the mouth. You get the idea there. Okay. Let me go on to the next piece here. Everyone's reflecting on that. Breathing through their nose and reflecting. Okay, so let's take all of that theory, all of those ideas, and turn it into a practice, into a way that you can shift your state into a balanced state. Because really, unless you're able to establish balance, all of this is just kind of interesting ideas. And it builds on what we just did then with the breathing. There's a breathing technique, I call it the even breath. And this is the most, I was reflecting on when I was planning this session for you guys, what's the most balanced technique that I know? And, a lot of meditation techniques will help you achieve some type of balance. But this one is just so epitomizes the state of balance that I couldn't go past it, the even breath. It is one I've developed myself, but no doubt other people have developed it themselves as well, and no doubt I wasn't the first. But anyway, I like to think that it's my technique. I call it the even breath. So in the even breath, you breathe in through the nose, but you breathe out through the mouth. Right? So it's even there. We're not going up into the upper part of our being. We're not getting stuck in the lower part of the being, but we've actually got a balance between the two. In through the nose, out through the mouth. With the even breath, the focus is not in the chest breathing, nor is it exclusively in the belly breathing, but it's both evenly. So we're trying to breathe evenly into both the chest and the belly on the in-breath, and breathe out from the chest and then the belly on the out-breath. I'll talk you through it. As an aside, if you tend to be focused up in your chest a lot more, which more of you were overall, then you're probably going to need to focus on the belly part of it. Moving the diaphragm, letting the belly expand as you breathe in, letting the belly contract as you breathe out. You're probably going to have to overemphasize that in order to find the balance between chest and belly. But what we're trying to end up with is that there's a nice balance between both of those, chest and belly breathing. So in through the nose, out through the mouth, balance between the chest and belly. Now, the other way that we create evenness with the even breath technique is in the duration. So we match the in-breath to the out-breath. If you breathe in for a count of 4 beats, then you need to breathe out for a count of 4 beats. So that the in-breath and out-breath are of even duration. Now, if I really wanted to take this further, a slightly more advanced version, then we also have holding the breath, what they call breath retention or kumbhaka. Holding the breath. So you would breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for a count of 4 beats, and then hold for 4. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4 breathing. These days, people are calling this box breathing, which I don't love that as a term, but it's so catchy, that annoyingly catchy, it's even caught me too. One of my teachers called it the 4-fold breath, which I feel is so much more elegant, but box breathing just rolls off the tongue, so be it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Even amount of duration from in, holding, out, and holding. Okay, that's a more complete or advanced version of this. I'm not going to do this with you tonight because it's just our first go. So don't worry about holding the breath. Just do what's comfortable. But in terms of the timing for us tonight, an even duration on the in-breath compared to the out-breath. And that's enough, really. You know, if I was going to add any other little piece to this, it's just your intention. Your intention is that you're creating a balanced state for yourself. Okay, that'll be the icing on top, the little cherry on top. Is if you can do it in a manner as if you were trying to create a balanced state for yourself, then yeah, that really adds that little X factor. But in terms of the mechanics, that's it. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the chest and the belly both being involved, and matching the duration of in-breath to the duration of out-breath. If you can do all of that tonight, you'll be doing really well. It's kind of three things at once. Okay, let's have a go with it. I'll talk you through it. We'll go for several minutes. Incidentally, most breathing techniques are not sustainable. Most breath patterns. You kind of can't do it all day. You practice for a short duration, and then you're done, you're cooked. This one is one of the few breathing techniques that you actually could just keep doing for a really long time, and you'd be quite fine. Anyway, we'll just do it for a few minutes. Let's give it a go. So I'll invite you now to close your eyes. And seeing as we are going to be breathing into the belly as well, you don't want to be too hunched over. You want to be sitting fairly upright without being tense, so that there's room for your diaphragm to move. There's room for your belly there's some space there. And with your eyes closed, I'll invite you now to turn your attention inwards. Relax your shoulders and your neck and your jaw. And without any great strain, become aware of your breath and see if on your next in-breath it can start with your belly expanding and then shift up to the chest expanding without any great strain. And as you breathe out, the chest can come down and then the belly can also squeeze and contract. So you're probably more active in your belly than you would, just because most people are lousy at belly breathing. Belly then up into your chest on the in-breath and coming down and emptying out from chest and belly on the out-breath. Make sure you breathe in through your nose, belly, then chest, and breathe out through your mouth, chest and belly, emptying out. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And maintaining that, I'd like you to start to focus on the duration of breath. So when you breathe in, you can have a mental count. Maybe you get to 4, maybe you get to 6, maybe you get to 8. Belly and then chest. And as you breathe out, try and have the same count. So if you breathe in for 6, breathe out for 6. You're allowed to have a pause between the breaths. Keep it comfortable. In through the nose, out through the mouth. We just need to go for a couple minutes more. Belly and then chest on the in-breath. Both of them emptying out on the out-breath. Just a few more breaths like that, almost done. And then relax that now, eyes are closed. And feel. Notice how that leaves you. Notice what that's done. And without losing this state that you've arrived at, without losing that, you can gradually allow yourself to come back. And in your own time, you can open your eyes. In a few moments, I will ask you for your experiences of that meditation and what you think that's done for you, what you feel or sense that has done. What does that one do? But first, I just wanted to briefly mention the one-on-one sessions that I offer for people. Most of what I do work-wise these days is work one-on-one with clients, as well as meditation coaching, personalized meditation training. I also practice as a counselor and therapist, a life coach, a couple of other things in there as well, health coach. And so I combine all of those together. If that's something that you're interested in, you want to know more, get in touch with me either by email or SMS or phone, and I can tell you more about that. But now I'd like to hear from you as to what did that do? How has that left you? What's the effect of that one? Chanel says, relaxed and hoping to sleep well. Thank you, Chanel. Lynette says, a sort of even keel feel afterwards. Exactly. That's what I notice. That's the best description I've come up with it for myself, is just really even keel. Anna, settled but slightly energized.
I feel centered and grounded but awake.
Centered and grounded but awake. Yeah, nice. I can breathe easier, says Charlotte. Yeah, absolutely. All the breathing techniques are really good for that. There's a little bit of work while you're doing the breathing, and then afterwards you relax, and like breathing is more effortless.
I'll add something, Stephen. I think I feel a little energized because I obviously don't breathe with my belly very much. So that just that movement and that bit of exertion energized me a little
Okay.
rather than being totally zoned out like after a
Yeah.
meditation. So
Yeah. Okay, energized rather than zoned out. Peter says, I think calmer and grounded. Yeah, nice. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so particularly if you add in the holding the breath and then holding the breath. So you breathe in and hold, and then you breathe out and hold. Particularly if you add that in, my experience with this one is very much puts you on that even keel where you're neither too awake and stimulated, but you're not sleepy either. You're just in a nice even space in terms of level of wakefulness. You're not too much up in your head, but you're not too heavy pulled down into the ground. You're just kind of there in the middle. And in so many other ways, emotionally, you're not too flat and shut down, but you're not too excited and bouncing around. You know, the mind doesn't get so slow that you can't think, but it's not racing and too busy. So it's somewhere in the middle. So on every level, my experience with that breathing technique is it brings you to a balanced state, to a state of neutrality, of somewhere in the middle. And that's why I say it's one of the few techniques of breathing, at least out of the repertoire that I work with and teach, one of the few techniques that is actually sustainable. You pretty much could do that all day if you wanted to. I'm not saying you have to or should, but it's not one that you can only do for 4 minutes and then you have to stop because you're cooked. It's one you can keep going with because it puts you in that evenness, in that state of evenness. And that state of evenness, hence why I call it the even breath, that state of evenness is a sustainable state. Being really up and happy and excited and switched on, that's not sustainable. It's fun, perhaps, but it's not sustainable. You can't maintain that forever because for every up, there's a down. If you're too heavy, sleepy, doped out, okay, that might be fun in a different sort of way, but it's also not sustainable because for every down, there's an up. But this evenness, that is something that you can just keep moving and keep moving and keep moving from. And in terms of that final idea of transcendence, if you achieve balance where you're neither too awake or too asleep, too up or too down, if you achieve that balance, then it allows you to transcend. You're basically no longer on the roller coaster of up and down, which means you're able to focus on other things. You might notice in your moment now, in the state you're in, it would not be hard for you to just move forward to doing something else from this point. You could move to an intellectual task and probably be quite fine, read a book. You could move to a physical thing, do the dishes, and probably be quite fine too. You could move to an emotional or relational thing, have a conversation with someone, and be quite fine too. So you're in that centered place of neutrality where it's very easy to move in whatever direction you need to. Anyway, I hope you got at least some of that experience. It's something that if you practice, especially including the holding of the breaths, that gets really, really obvious, that state. But it sounds like, at least for some of you, we were able to really hit that already. So much of what we hold in the body can be eased and released just with a little bit of simple breathing. And it's the awareness and the intention as well as the breathing that can really shift things. So simple, simple things can be very, very powerful. Awareness is the first step to change. The first step in creating balance is to recognize the imbalance. So much of the work that I do with clients one-on-one comes down to balance, issues of balance. It's just one of those master keys that keep recurring, that keep coming up. And when we actually achieve balance in an area of our life where we've been out of balance for a really long time, when you actually achieve that balance, it's very liberating. It's transformational of your experience of life. Anna says the idea of transcendence and how you can free yourself up for higher things. Yeah, absolutely. It exists within the bigger picture, the creation of balance. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate your time, attention, and participation, and for your bravery in having cameras on for most of you. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you, and I hope until then you experience some wonderful balance in your life. Thank you all.